I knew something was off the moment I saw the flattened tire tracks in the dirt. It was a hot Wednesday morning and I was already sweating before I even reached my truck. I'd parked it just inside the fencing of the small 5-acre farm I inherited from my grandfather. I don't grow crops or raise cattle. I work in HVAC and just use the land to store some of my gear and unwind. It's quiet. Or at least it used to be. My name's Quinton Paerce and I've lived in Willow Glen for about 7 years now. I bought the house right beside the farm property after Granddad passed. I thought I'd found peace. But then came the HOA. And worse, Sheryl Dandridge. Sheryl is everything you'd imagine when someone says Karen. 50-something, bleached hair, always wearing a visor like she's headed to a tennis match she never plays. She's also head of the Willow Glen Homeowners Association, although no one actually remembers voting her in. She just took over. "Quinton, your truck is an eyesore," she'd said the first time we clashed. "Maybe if you didn't treat that land like a junkyard, you'd get fewer complaints." "It's farm property, Sheryl." "It's not even under HOA jurisdiction," I'd replied. She'd waved her clipboard like it was some kind of legal document. "It's within proximity of HOA lines. That means community aesthetics apply." That conversation had happened 3 weeks ago. Since then, I'd found trash dumped at my gate, received 2 fake violation letters in the mail, and one of my motion lights had mysteriously gone missing. But slashing my tires? That was a new low. I crouched beside the front driver's side wheel of my old F-150. Slashed clean through, not just punctured. The other front tire, too. I felt my jaw lock. I knew it was her. Sheryl had been escalating ever since I refused to move my truck from the gravel patch on my own land. She said it lowered neighborhood value and attracted rodents. I ignored her, and now here I was, stranded with 2 ruined tires and no witnesses. Or so she thought. I didn't say a word to anyone that day. I called a buddy to help tow the truck and quietly replace the tires. But before I did, I installed 4 trail cameras around the property. A couple strapped to trees, a few disguised in birdhouses, wide angles, night vision, motion activated. I wasn't just going to catch her, I was going to bury her with proof. The very next weekend, I got exactly what I was waiting for. It was Saturday night, just after 10. I was at home watching an old Western when my phone buzzed. Motion detected. I tapped the app and pulled up the live feed. There she was, strutting through the side gate in her pastel walking shoes, wielding something shiny in her hand. She crouched by the passenger side tire and jabbed 3 times. Then she stood, looked around like a raccoon caught in a trash can, and scurried back through the gate. I sat there stunned. Not because I was surprised she did it, but because she did it again. I had clear footage from 2 angles. Face, weapon, the whole thing. I didn't waste time. I downloaded the footage, slapped it on a flash drive, and made 3 copies. I called my friend Jonah, he's a sheriff's deputy over in the next county, and asked him what the process was to file a report for felony vandalism. When I told him I had video, his tone changed immediately. "You're not playing around," he said. "Send me the footage. I'll walk it into the station myself." The next morning, I drove down to the precinct and handed over everything. The report was filed, and they said they'd assign it to a detective within the week. But I didn't stop there. I knew from the last HOA meeting that Sheryl loved attention. She always opened the meetings with a smug little speech about community values, while sipping lemon water like she was the queen of the suburbs. So I decided to hit her where it would hurt the most, her image. The next HOA meeting was on Wednesday night. I showed up early, sat in the back, and waited. "Before we begin," Sheryl said, standing confidently at the podium, "I'd like to remind everyone about the importance of keeping our neighborhood beautiful. That includes reporting any unsightly vehicles or unkempt lots to the committee." I raised my hand. Sheryl frowned. "Quinton, this isn't time for open forum." I stood up anyway. "Actually, I think the neighborhood needs to see something." I pulled a small portable projector from my bag and plugged in the flash drive. People murmured as the video started to play on the white wall behind her. At first, silence. Then gasps. "Is that Sheryl? Oh my God, she's stabbing the tire. Is that her again?" Sheryl turned to look and her face drained of color. That's taken out of context. Really? I said. Because I have timestamps. And the police have the originals. She started sputtering. This is slander. You can't just I cut in, it's evidence. And the sheriff's department thinks so too. The room exploded in whispers. I didn't wait for her to respond. I walked out as she stood frozen at the front of the room, eyes darting around for anyone to defend her. No one did. By Friday, I got the call. Detective Latham confirmed they were issuing a warrant for Sheryl Dandridge's arrest on 2 counts of felony vandalism. They also found the weapon. She used a box cutter with tire residue on the blade when they searched her garden shed. I was told to stay available in case they needed me for court. I said I'd be ready. The morning after the HOA meeting fallout, I was sitting on my back porch with a coffee, watching fog roll off the pasture grass, when I saw Deputy Latham's cruiser pull up to the house. He stepped out, notepad tucked under his arm, and walked over like he had something heavy to drop. "Morning, Quinton," he said. "Morning, Deputy. Something new?" He nodded. "Yeah. Thought you'd want to hear it from me first. We served the warrant late last night. Dandridge wasn't home. Neighbor said she packed a suitcase and left around dinner time." "Dodging arrest?" I asked. "Looks that way, but she won't get far. We put out a bolo across county lines. Her car plates are flagged." I leaned against the railing, letting that sink in. "So she ran?" He tapped the notepad against his palm. "She ran. Which makes this a whole different matter now. Skipping out on a felony warrant won't just get her a court date, it could mean jail time." It figured. Sheryl Dandridge loved to dictate rules, but clearly didn't think they applied to her. Before he left, Latham handed me a copy of the report. "Keep this. If anyone from the HOA tries to retaliate or harass you, you have grounds to file a protection order. This isn't just a neighborly spat now, it's a criminal investigation." I thanked him and watched the cruiser vanish down the road. That should have been the end of it. Sheryl gone, her face caught on camera, the law doing its job. But I should have known her fingerprints were deeper than just her own bad behavior. 2 days later, a manila envelope showed up in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a typed notice from the Willow Glen Compliance Committee, stating I was being fined $2,000 for disruptive conduct during a community function and public defamation of leadership. I read it twice. It was absurd on its face. There was no such thing as a compliance committee in the HOA charter. I knew that because I'd gone through the charter line by line after our first clash. This was something completely fabricated, clearly put together by someone trying to keep the wheels turning while Sheryl was on the run. I didn't throw it away. I scanned it, printed copies, and emailed the scan to Jonah, the deputy who'd first taken my statement. He called me within the hour. "Quinton, that's mail fraud if they sent it through USPS. And if there's no legitimate committee behind that letter, it's also impersonation of authority. So what do? You let me forward it to the county attorney. This thing's unraveling faster than they can glue it back together." That night, I got a call from my neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez. She lived 2 doors down, retired school librarian, always kept a neat garden and a sharper memory. "Quinton, I don't know if you heard, but 3 people from the HOA board met at Sheryl's house last week. I saw them with folders and boxes. They didn't know I was out on my back porch." "Who was it?" I asked. "Leon, that man who always brings his own gavel like he's some kind of judge. And the Fergusons, you know, the couple who run the holiday decorating committee like it's a military operation." I jotted it down. "You see them take anything?" "That's the thing. They left with 2 boxes. One had archives written on it in marker." I thanked her and hung up. That explained the fake committee letter. They were trying to keep control of the HOA by dragging out whatever old documents they could twist into authority. And with Sheryl gone, they were scrambling. The next HOA meeting was scheduled for Monday night. I didn't plan to go at first. I figured I'd done my damage and the rest would shake out in court. But then I got a text from Jonah. One of the Fergusons, Jamie, had been spotted entering the community center office with a ring of keys that didn't belong to her. "She's not on the board officially," he said. Only Sheryl had access to that building. If she's going in, she's doing it under color of authority she doesn't have. That was enough for me. I didn't just go, I brought backup. I contacted 3 other homeowners who'd had run-ins with the HOA but never had proof. One had been fined for putting a child's sandbox on their lawn. Another was threatened with foreclosure because their mailbox wasn't regulation height. And one guy, Dan, had been forced to repaint his shed twice because the paint looked too bold. We all met the night before and compared notes. Turns out Sheryl and her inner circle had been running a shadow operation for years. Unauthorized fines, baseless threats, and falsified violation notices. They'd bullied people into paying, and most were too afraid or uninformed to challenge it. So we made a plan. When Monday came, we showed up early and stood near the sign-in table. Jamie Ferguson wore a pink blazer like she was ready to pose for a magazine cover. Leon had his ridiculous gavel tucked under his arm. They looked smug until Jonah walked in wearing his badge. Jamie's cheerful greeting faltered. "Oh, deputy, this is a private meeting for HOA members only." Jonah didn't blink. "Good thing I'm a homeowner in this county too. And this isn't a private anything. You're conducting business that affects public property use. That makes this meeting subject to oversight." Leon tried to cut in. "We have rules about guest conduct." Jonah lifted the fake fine letter. "You also have rules about legal committee structure, which this violates. You sent mail using a made-up committee name to issue a fraudulent fine. That's a federal crime." The room went quiet. I stepped up beside him. "We also have statements from homeowners who were bullied, fined, and manipulated. And we've got copies of everything, your fake notices, your backdated forms, even a copy of the original HOA charter, which, by the way, says nothing about you having executive powers." Jamie looked like she wanted to teleport out of the room. "You're twisting this. We were just trying to keep order after Sheryl fled a felony charge." I said. "And you broke into the community center using stolen keys to cover for her?" Jonah turned toward the crowd. "If anyone else has received unauthorized fines or threats, now's the time to speak. We're opening a formal investigation into the HOA's conduct. Victims of fraud will be referred to the county restitution office." What happened next was like floodgates bursting. Homeowner after homeowner stepped forward. One said they'd been charged $700 for a fence violation that was never documented. Another said their HOA dues had been hiked without a vote. Someone else revealed they'd paid over $2,000 in legal fees when the HOA threatened to sue over a garden gnome. By the end of the night, Jonah had a full list of names, dates, and copies of every piece of evidence we could gather. The entire HOA board, minus 2 silent members who resigned on the spot, was placed under formal review. By Thursday, the county issued a cease and desist order against the Willow Glen HOA. All fines were frozen. Bank accounts were subpoenaed. And the state's attorney general announced a civil investigation into misappropriated funds. Sheryl was picked up 12 miles away, hiding at her sister's house in a gated golf community. She was booked without bail. As for me, I went back to my farm the next morning, let the dog run through the dew-soaked grass, and parked my truck exactly where it had always been. No one said a word. It was early Friday morning when I got the call that tipped everything sideways. I was elbow-deep in a ductwork retrofit over in Hillside when my phone buzzed again and again in my pocket. When I finally stepped out to check it, I had 5 missed calls and 3 voicemails, all from Dan, one of the homeowners who'd spoken out during the last meeting. When I called him back, his voice came through strained and urgent. "They torched my shed, Quinton." I went still. "What do you mean torched?" "I mean it burned to the ground. Fire marshal thinks it was deliberate. My tools, my generator, the whole back wall collapsed. I was lucky it didn't spread to the house. I didn't say anything right away. The air around me seemed to thin. After everything that had happened, the arrests, the cease and desist, the investigation, I thought we'd broken the back of the beast. But this wasn't desperation. This was retaliation." "Did you see anyone?" I asked. "No, but I had a trail cam behind the compost bins. Didn't even think about it till this morning." He paused, then added, I sent the footage to Jonah already. You're not going to believe who it was. I drove straight from the job site to Dan's house. The charred remains of the shed were still smoldering, yellow tape sagging between fence posts. A fire truck had already cleared out, but the stink of melted plastic and singed ash hung thick in the air. Jonah arrived 20 minutes later. He didn't wait for pleasantries. We ID'd the arsonist, he said, holding up a photo still from the trail cam footage. That's Leon. Leon. The man with the gavel. Self-appointed HOA enforcer and Sheryl's most vocal supporter. He was dressed in dark clothes, a hoodie pulled tight around his face. But the camera caught him at the worst possible moment, turning toward the shed as he poured something from a red container. His face, lit briefly by the flame, was unmistakable. Gasoline? I asked. Accelerant. Most likely a fuel mix. We're having it analyzed. But Dan's cam caught the whole thing, including Leon driving off in that ridiculous green sedan of his. Dan stepped out onto his porch, face pale and drawn. Do you think he was trying to scare me? Or was that meant to be worse? Jonah didn't answer right away. We're treating it as attempted arson with potential for bodily harm. That's a felony with serious prison time, especially if it can be tied to an ongoing pattern of intimidation. I looked across the yard at the scorched ground, the blackened skeletal remains of what used to be a workshop. They're trying to keep people quiet, I said. They know the investigation's closing in. Jonah nodded. And we've got enough now to push this even further. This isn't just about HOA fraud anymore. We're into criminal conspiracy territory. I hadn't heard that term since my cousin got caught up in a racketeering case back in Baton Rouge. It wasn't something you threw around lightly. But it made sense. Sheryl may have been the face of it all, but Leon and the others weren't just passive participants. They were running cover, falsifying documents, and now committing arson. This was organized, coordinated. Jonah told us the county attorney had already looped in the state prosecutor. If they could prove the HOA had used its authority to systematically harass, defraud, and now endanger homeowners, it could lead to a RICO case. That's when I realized we needed to go even deeper. Later that evening, I called up a friend from my old days working city contracts, Monica Reyes, now a compliance auditor for the State Board of Housing Oversight. She wasn't the type to exchange favors, but when I told her what had happened, she agreed to meet. We sat across from each other in a quiet corner of a diner off Route 45. Monica was all business wire rim glasses, notepad already open before the waitress even brought our water. Start from the beginning, she said. I gave her the full rundown, starting with the fake fines, the fabricated compliance committee, the break-ins at the community office, all the way to the tire slashing and now the arson. She didn't interrupt once, just kept scribbling. When I finished, she closed the notepad. You're describing what we call a closed-loop exploitation model. A small group takes control of a local authority like an HOA and uses it to extract money or compliance from residents through intimidation or false penalties. It's rare, but we've seen it before. Can the state step in? I asked. Monica nodded. If there's documented fraud or misuse of authority, we can dissolve the HOA's charter and freeze its assets. But that takes time. What you need to do is follow the money. That's the thread that unravels everything. Money. Of course. I went home that night and pulled out the scanned letters, the violation notices, and the HOA budget summary that had been handed out at the last meeting Sheryl had chaired. I started comparing names, dates, and amounts. Something didn't sit right. The HOA's last financial report claimed they'd spent over $30,000 on legal defense services in the past year, but there were no records of any lawsuits filed by or against them. And the listed law firm? I looked it up. It didn't exist. I dug deeper. One of the account numbers listed for legal retainer payments matched a personal checking account belonging to L. Raleigh. It took me a few minutes to realize Leon Raleigh. He created a fake firm and used it to siphon funds. I sent everything to Monica and Jonah. Within 24 hours, the state's Financial Crimes Division opened an inquiry into embezzlement and wire fraud. By Monday, subpoenas were issued for Leon's personal and business records. They raided his house that afternoon, found over 50 HOA checks deposited into various shell accounts. One was even under his cat's name. Leon was arrested on the spot. That night, I attended what was supposed to be an emergency board meeting hastily organized by the last 2 remaining members who hadn't been implicated yet. Only about a dozen residents showed up, but that was enough. When they tried to explain that the HOA would be restructuring, I stood up and laid out everything we'd uncovered: fraudulent firms, embezzlement, threats, arson. The 2 remaining board members didn't even try to deny it. They just sat down and said nothing. Monica had warned me this might happen. That once the key players were arrested or exposed, the structure would collapse under its own weight. And that's exactly what it did. By the end of the week, the state voided Willow Glen's HOA charter. The bank accounts were locked. All fines issued in the past 2 years were nullified. Residents who had paid illegal penalties were added to a restitution list. Sheryl, Leon, and Jamie were all facing felony charges: vandalism, arson, mail fraud, and financial crimes. The Fergusons lawyered up, but I heard whispers they were trying to cut a deal behind closed doors. Dan rebuilt his shed with help from neighbors. I brought over spare lumber and helped put up the new roof. He didn't say much about the fire after that, but whenever I passed his place, I saw the new motion lights he'd installed brighter than mine and set to trigger at the slightest movement. As for me, I went back to work like usual. HVAC busy season was kicking in, and folks were eager to have someone they could trust. I kept the cameras on my farm property, though. Not out of fear, but as a reminder. That peace isn't something you're given in a place like Willow Glen. You take it. You protect it. And when someone decides to turn a neighborhood into their personal kingdom, you don't just stand by. You dig in. You document. You fight smart. Because when people like Sheryl or Leon think they can run a community with lies and threats, the best weapon isn't noise. It's proof. A week after Leon's arrest, the neighborhood was quiet in a way that felt unnatural, like the air after a storm. Still thick with debris, but eerily motionless. The usual HOA notices that used to clutter mailboxes had vanished, and the front gate bulletin board was empty for the first time in years. No flyers, no reminder slips, not even one of those over-formatted newsletters with Sheryl's face in the header. It was like the whole operation had evaporated. But I knew better. Something was still brewing. On Thursday morning, I got a call from Monica. Her voice was clipped, direct. "I need you to come to the state housing office. Now, bring the original hard copy of the HOA's last mailed budget report, the one you scanned and emailed me." I didn't ask questions. I grabbed the sealed folder from my office cabinet and drove the 45 minutes to the state building downtown. The parking lot was full, but the inside was dead silent, like everyone had stepped out at once. Monica was waiting for me just inside the glass doors, as sharp as ever. They tried to doctor the reports, she said as she led me to a small conference room. Whoever has access to the HOA's remaining digital files logged in last night and rewrote the budget ledgers for the last 2 years. They removed all references to the fake legal firm and reallocated the funds to vague line items: community outreach, consulting fees, and so on. "They're trying to bury the evidence," I said, handing her the folder. "Exactly. But what they didn't know was that your original scan had embedded metadata, timestamps, document ID, even the printer model. And now, with this hard copy, we can prove the tampering." She opened the folder and laid the document flat. "This gives us what we need to escalate. We're referring the case to the state's Office of Public Integrity. It's no longer just a housing issue. It's a financial crime investigation." I exhaled slowly. "How deep does this go?" Monica glanced at the door, then lowered her voice. "We're looking at money laundering, possibly tax evasion. If they funneled HOA funds through fake firms, and then declared those payments as legitimate business expenses on their personal taxes, that's federal." I left the office feeling heavier than I had in weeks. The stakes had gone from local drama to potential prison sentences. What started as a slashed tire was now spiraling into a full-blown white-collar crime case. But the moment I pulled into my driveway, that weight dropped straight into my gut. My front gate had been ripped out of the ground. The posts were split clean through, like someone had backed a truck into them. The latch was bent and hanging off the side, and tire marks gouged deep into the gravel path. My dog was barking furiously from the porch, hackles raised, tail rigid. I ran to the house. Nothing inside had been touched. But out back, the utility shed door was swinging open, and inside, my lockbox was gone. The one I used for document duplicates, backup trail cam footage, and a spare hard drive with every piece of evidence I collected. I called Jonah immediately. "They took the box," I said. "Every copy of the footage, every printed document, even the duplicates I made of the budget scans." "Were you followed back from the state office?" "I don't know. I didn't notice anyone, but they knew exactly what to take." He didn't hesitate. "Get to the sheriff's building. Bring your phone and your laptop. If they accessed anything online or through your Wi-Fi, we may need to pull logs." 2 hours later, I sat in a small office with Jonah, a state investigator named Ridgway, and a federal agent from the IRS Criminal Division. Apparently, once the tax aspect came into play, the feds jumped in with both feet. Ridgway tapped a pen against the desk slowly. "We believe someone still loyal to the original HOA leadership is trying to scrub every trace of wrongdoing. They're getting desperate. You just became a higher value target." The IRS agent, a tall woman with a no-nonsense haircut named Gaines, leaned forward. "Did you back up your files anywhere off-site?" "Cloud storage, encrypted drive." I nodded. "I uploaded everything to a remote server I used during my contracting days. It's hidden under a dummy domain." "Good," she said, "because now you're a key witness in a federal prosecution." I didn't say anything. I just sat there letting the reality of it settle in. This wasn't about a nosy neighbor with too much time on her hands anymore. This was about exposing a criminal enterprise that had been hiding behind HOA bylaws and suburban politics. By the end of the day, Gaines had secured a court order to freeze all remaining HOA-related accounts, including personal ones tied to Sheryl, Leon, and any other board member under suspicion. They traced 3 wire transfers from the HOA's treasury account to an offshore holding company registered in Belize. The name on the registration matched a known shell corporation used in other fraud cases. The last thread snapped 2 days later. A whistleblower came forward, a young woman named Ava who had worked as a temp assistant for Jamie Ferguson's property management company. She had invoices, internal emails, and most damning of all, a voice recording of Jamie instructing her to make the budget numbers match or just borrow from the landscaping line again. Ava had been afraid to come forward before, but once she saw the news coverage of the investigation, she realized she wasn't alone. Her evidence was the final nail. Within 72 hours, state prosecutors filed charges against Jamie for conspiracy to commit financial fraud and obstruction of justice. The Fergusons' assets were frozen. Their lake house upstate was seized. The news made local headlines and even got a 15-second mention on a national news segment about HOA corruption. On a rainy Tuesday morning, the court issued a full dissolution order for the Willow Glen Homeowners Association. Their charter was voided, all remaining funds were seized for restitution, and a third-party mediator was appointed by the county to oversee any remaining community issues until residents could vote to form a new, voluntary neighborhood council. I didn't attend the press conference. I didn't need to. I'd already said everything I needed to say. 2 weeks later, neighbors started pulling down the old HOA signage. Someone spray-painted "free" on the community center billboard. The air felt different, lighter, like the place was finally breathing again. People waved more. Kids played in front yards again. A veteran down the road put up a flagpole he'd been told was against aesthetic standards. No one stopped him. One afternoon, I stood by my rebuilt gate, stronger than the last one, anchored in reinforced concrete, and watched as a group of neighbors gathered across the road. Dan was there, along with Mrs. Rodriguez and a few others. They were organizing a community barbecue. No committees. No permits. Just people getting together. Monica called me one last time that week. We're closing the file, she said. You should know your documentation? It's going to be used in a training seminar for new housing auditors. I laughed, glad I could help flush out the rot. You did more than that. You exposed a system that was built to intimidate and steal. Most people don't fight back. You did. And now others will. I hung up and looked out at the land. My land. No more fake notices. No more slashed tires. No more fear of retaliation. The trail cams were still up, but they hadn't gone off in days. I left them there anyway, not because I expected trouble, but because I knew now peace isn't just something you earn. It's something you defend.